Welcome to another edition of Beyond the Faceoff with Mr. Ryan Galloway. How are you doing today, my friend?
I'm great, Kev. It's nice, nice blue sky here in Minnesota. It's a little bit cool, but it's a blue sky, so it doesn't matter how cold it is as long as the sky's nice.
Yeah, exactly. Sun always seems to put a smile on everybody's faces, even though it's the deep of winter. So, yeah,
I, I, no, I was
yeah,
just gonna say I just came back from supervising in Duluth, and it was I think -6 Celsius there, but with the humidity, felt like it was -40. I don't care what anybody says about dry cold versus humid cold. There is a significant difference. It was ridiculous how cold it was.
100%. I've lived in all sorts of different climates, and yeah, wet is definitely bone chilling.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so today's topic I wanted to talk to you about was everyone knows that you have been an NHL linesman, which involves a lot of travel. So, we're going to talk about living on the road. And during the season, how often are you really on the road during the season? Like, how many home games that you have there versus what your travel schedule is like?
Well, that's one thing. I mean, as an official, you never have home games. I mean, yeah, I'd work maybe a half half dozen games here in Minnesota when I was at home, but it was never. It was more like it was just sort of a stop along another road trip when I was at home working a game. I would probably average in a season 150 nights in a hotel room. Um, yeah, it would be like our normal road trips would be kind of in the seven to 9 days sort of time frame, and then you come home for a couple days. And if you're home for 3 days, it was basically one day travel home, one day to actually be home, and then the third day you're out off to the next city. Now, if I was working a game in Minnesota, as I said, it was just kind of another stop along the way where I'd come home and work the next day, and then fly out the following day. So the 7 day road trip all of a sudden became 14 by that point.
Yeah, with a schedule like that, is it tough to make adjustments in your personal life to accommodate those demands of traveling?
I always lived kind of a very segmented life. Like I had my home life and dealing with responsibilities of being home and taking care of things. But then road life was completely different. It was the the expectations when you're an official in the NHL is you're like a almost like an independent contractor. You're having to make your travel plans, make the plans to get from one city to the next. Um, book your hotels, book your car rentals, cabs when you get to the city. It's funny when I got hired, I sort of assumed all that stuff was taken care of. I just had to show up for work, but what would normally happen was the schedule would come out, and you'd spend probably a day booking your travel of looking through different flight options from city to city, and then once your flight plans were booked, then you'd book your hotel rooms, and then if you needed to book car rentals, you'd do that afterwards. So it was probably a good day and a half of actually doing that. And we would book all our own. We, we would book our own. We would pay for our own hotels and then submit like any other business. The hotel or the flights, we would deal with one travel agent, and all that was just sort of billed directly to the league. But yeah, we were my one boss used to say, he said, you have to operate it like it's your own business. You have to take care of the expenses, and you have to do everything that comes along with booking your travel. But yeah, I really lived sort of two separate lives. There was my time on the road, and my time at home, and I think I said earlier in one of the podcasts about when I was home, it was important that I was at home,
Mm.
mentally and physically. I was at home, and sort of had to have those 3 days to disconnect from the game to be fair to my relationships and friends and people that I had to see. But it was important that when I was home, I was at home.
Yeah, no, totally agree, 100%. And it sounds like you have done that over the years, which I'm sure your wife definitely does appreciate.
I think she appreciates that. Our guest bedroom in the basement is kind of my staging room. So none of my work stuff ever comes upstairs. Everything comes right in the front door and goes right down to the basement. So I think she appreciates that separation of work life from home life.
Like you had said, there's a lot of scheduling and stuff that you had to do on your own. Is there anything else that people really wouldn't be aware of what you actually have to do on your own versus what has been done for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's making the arrangements from getting from the hotel to the or from the airport to the hotel, and sort of navigating that. Um, Obviously we're living from restaurant to restaurant, so there's that aspect of it too. And along the way, you might have injuries that you have to find treatment for along the way. And thankfully we've got fantastic trainers that work with the teams that if I'll give you an example. I was in Boston a couple of years back, and I needed an MRI. I had a day off the next day. The trainer for the team arranged all that for me, and just told me where I had to go to. So we're pretty fortunate to have those kind of connections and the support from their staff to take care of our medical needs. But yeah, it was. Once you're on the road, you're basically on your own. Sometimes you meet up with the guys. You might have a day off with somebody else, but a lot of times they're traveling in that night, and you're spending the day by yourself. So it's it was all part of the job, part of the expectations, and you just sort of learn to live with it. It's what it takes to be part of the job.
And was that something that was sort of taught to you, or was sort of like on the job training type of thing? You just sort of learn as you go.
Yeah, very much on the job. Um, we lean on the veteran guys when you're starting your career on kind of tips and ideas. Listen, when I first started, there used to be a book probably about that thick that you would pick up from the airport, and it would have all of the commercial flight schedules for all the different airlines, and that's what you use to decide which flights you're on. You actually had to flip through the book and what are the options between Columbus and pick a city, Florida. Um, and that's what we used. And then obviously the internet became more prevalent, and that made that easier. But yeah, you definitely lean on the veteran guys to help you out with sort of navigating that. I'm still, even after 22 years, I'm still terrified of traveling on the East Coast just because it's a different type of travel there. It's not as much air travel; it's more train travel, and
Ah.
um, train travel is a completely different animal than flying. In many ways better and more more civilized, but just a totally different style of traveling. So yeah, you leaned on the veteran guys to help you out with navigating that.
Yeah, sort of to follow up on that, have you had any difficult travel experiences, like delays, cancellations, or last minute changes, uh, that almost prevented you from attending and making a game?
I don't think there was ever a season that I didn't have an issue with flights that I didn't have to get in contact with our scheduler, whether it's just a heads up that the flight from Calgary to Vancouver, there's a snowstorm coming in, and the flight's delayed by 4 hours. I should still get there on time, but just giving him the heads up just in case he has to make a last minute change. So there was never a season that went by that there wasn't that kind of thing. Or conversely, where somebody is traveling through an area like the East Coast where a storm would blow in and basically shut that area down. Of I might be at home, and all of a sudden I got a message saying, "Hey, listen, I need you to get on a flight tonight to work a game on the island tomorrow. Um, can you do that?" So, and obviously you'd never say no.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, there's always that having to do those quick adjustments on flights. Now I remember one game I was in St. Louis. I was working in St. Louis, and I think it was the one day. It was the one day after I think it was Boxing Day, right after Christmas, and normally I would fly into a city the night before, just so I was there and I didn't have to worry about travel. But because it was Christmas, I decided to fly Boxing Day, and I remember my flight was delayed. Finally, the flight went through. Um, if everything went well, I was going to get to St. Louis at about, I don't know, let's say 5:30 for a 7 o'clock game or a 7:30 game. Um, and when I get there, my equipment's not there. So now not only am I scrambling to get to the rink, but again, we relied so heavily on the equipment managers for taking care of our needs when something like that happens. Every city at the time would have a set of referee equipment there, but it's the easy part is getting the equipment. It's the skates are always the hard part. So you're hoping that somebody on the team has the same size feet as you and you can borrow their practice skates, whatever it was. But so yeah, I raced in. I think I got to the game about 20 minutes before we were supposed to hit the ice. My equipment was sitting there waiting for me. I think I shoehorned my feet into the skates, but you make do and you do what you have to do. It was the one time since I put a visor on where they weren't able to get a visor on my helmet, and when I stepped out on the ice, I basically felt like I was naked. But that's just part of the job. You have to be able to adjust to it, and you control what you can control. You book your travel and you travel as smart as you can, but there's just some things that are outside of your control, and weather, mechanical, whatever it is with the flights, and you just have to be ready to adjust.
So it was just the one time you had to actually use somebody else's skates. How did that actually feel?
Yeah, no, that listen, you could give me any piece of equipment, but skates are such a personal thing.
Hmm.
Um, they can sharpen them to the edge that you want, but it's never the same. The dimensions of the blade are never the same, and just the how the skate feels is completely different. Um, it's an adjustment for sure. You kind of feel like you're Bambi out on the ice when you first step out there, but it comes around fairly quick. You tell the players they might want to stay away from you when you're coming in for a stop, but um, they like I said, the equipment guys are just fantastic with how they took care of us. I will say another time, the year that I went to Switzerland for the World Juniors, I connected through Toronto, and my equipment bag stayed. Actually, all my stuff stayed in Toronto. So I went the first week without any equipment or any clothes. I was begging and borrowing from the guys that I was working with that were the same size as me. Now at the time you could carry your skates on the plane, so I think I had no, I definitely had my skates, but everything else I had to go to the store and buy right from socks and underwear to a dress shirt and tie. So
Wow.
again, that's just part of it, and you adjust and you do the best that you can.
Wow, crazy to think that you are arriving in to go and do your job, and it's like, boom, you don't have your equipment to actually do your job. But it's great that you do have
Yeah,
the network of the equipment managers for all those teams to be able to help you out.
yeah.
How do you deal with fatigue and staying sharp on the ice after those long travel days? Like, did you ever have to travel across multiple time zones for your next assignment? And like, what's the most number of time zones you've actually had to travel across? And yeah, and did you
At the end,
have to officiate the next day or the same day, sort of thing?
at the NHL level, the most time zones I would travel would be two. I'd always kind of come from the central down to California, so you're going into Pacific or Vancouver. So generally two would be the most when I was pro. Obviously, when I went overseas, that was a different story. But um, most of the time, day of game travel would be at most maybe one time zone. There were odd occasions where guys would have to travel more than one time zone. But generally, if you're traveling that far, you're generally flying in the night before, and having a day to sort of reset the clock and get some rest. Now, how did I deal with it? Well, that came that came with age, and the smarter I got, I guess, as I got older, that you realize how important sleep is and getting the proper rest. So um, early in my career, I'd get to the city and I'd be excited to be there and connect with the guys if they were in town. Um, and probably wasn't taking as good a physical care or sleep care of myself as I should have. But with age, you realize that if you're working tired, you're not doing the job properly. So uh, quickly realize that rest is the most important thing. You get to the city, you have a meal, and I always tried to keep my sleep time the same, regardless of which time zone I was in. So if I was going from Minnesota to California, and I would normally go to bed at 11 o'clock, I would stay up till 11 o'clock, so that that part of my clock stayed the same, and vice versa. If I went to the east, I might be going to bed an hour earlier than I would if I was at home. But that's just for me, that was the easiest way to keep my clock on a sort of regular schedule.
No, that's definitely a challenge for those that do have to travel multiple time zones. So it's good to try and keep those and maybe pass those tips on to the younger officials that are coming up as well to keep those I think those things in mind when you are starting to do a lot more travel.
And that's the hardest thing about doing a physical job when you're having to travel is getting the proper rest and getting the proper nutrition. So it's all about making better decisions and smarter decisions, and realizing that you have to be accountable to yourself, and make sure you are making those good decisions so that you are able to perform at a high level the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, like, what was it like being away from family and friends for long stretches of time as well? It's like, how did you stay connected with them?
Well, again, when the cell phones became more prevalent, and the internet and FaceTime and everything else, it became a little bit easier. Um, Still didn't stay as connected to people as I would have liked. There's a lot of times where you lose those connections and relationships as much as you try to keep them going. But sometimes between my schedule and their schedule just might not work out of being able to talk as much as we would if I wasn't traveling as much. But yeah, again, that's another part of it is you try to maintain those relationships as best as you can. And again, the internet certainly made it a lot easier of being able to do that. Text messaging, even if it's just a quick message to a friend to say, "Hey, how you doing?" or "Hey, I'm coming to Calgary. You want to get together for dinner?" Those kind of things. They were important to do, and it put a little bit of sanity in your world when you're living out of a suitcase to have those connections either via text or getting to a city where you can connect with an old friend.
Yeah, and I definitely have to give kudos to Rhonda, even though I don't know if she better watch this because I'm giving her a shout out about sharing the schedule when she found out to the whole network so that you could actually reach out and possibly meet for a dinner or something in those cities. So kudos to her for being your other half to keep everyone informed about what your travel schedule was because I'm pretty sure you didn't have time to be able to do that yourself.
I probably don't know half the work that she did behind the scenes to, just it takes a special person to be able to um, you know see your partner leave for a week at a time, and be able to maintain everything at home. And I was so fortunate that Ron was understanding with what it took to do this job. But yeah, her sending out the schedule, and just letting people know when I was coming to a city, and people that would reach out like yourself, and our mutual friend down in California, that I always say that's the one really nice thing, or one of the really nice benefits of this job, was being able to get to cities that I probably wouldn't be able to get to otherwise, and to be able to go for dinner with you, or go for a hike with Dave when I was in California, or go for a coffee with a friend of mine in Denver, whatever it was. But that was one of the nice benefits of the job, was be able to reconnect with people.
So that sort of leads into my next curiosity is what's the most rewarding experiences that you've had by being a ref on the road? Like you said, it's an opportunity to meet up with friends. Any other kind of rewarding experiences that you've had?
To be able to travel to different cities on somebody else's dime, and to have the downtime that we had, to be able to go out and explore different cities. I remember one Super Bowl afternoon a few years back. I was in Washington, and I said to my buddy, I said, he was still he was still staying overnight that night. And I said, well, I'll meet you back in the lounge, and we'll watch the football game together. Well, I ended up going for I think it turned out to be about a 5 hour walk, just walking around the Washington Mall, not a shopping mall, but Washington Mall, where all the monuments and museums, and all these buildings that you see on TV every time you flip the news on. And I'm standing in front of the White House, or standing in front of the Capitol building. All those experiences of being able to take in what's in every city. I remember going for a walk one day in Columbus, and not disparaging Columbus at all, but Columbus was always kind of seen as a city that, whatever, you just went there, you went to your hotel, you had dinner, and you went to work. And I went for a walk one day, and it's such a beautiful city to walk around. It's got a really nice river walk, and I'd always seen this facade of a building kind of as you're getting near the arena, and I never knew what it was. But when I went for a walk, I actually walked by it, and it was the old Ohio State Prison, and they had kept the facade of the front entrance to it, and then behind it was a park where the rest of the building, where the rest of the prison would have been. But to just be able to experience those things, to go up in the St. Louis Arch, like what other opportunity would I have had to go up in the St. Louis Arch? Oh, I mean, there's countless. In my last season, I was able to spend New Year's Eve in New York and be right down at Times Square and experience what being there when the ball drops. Again, a very unique situation we have with the connection we have in New York, to be able to have that kind of an opportunity, and just memories that if it wasn't for this job, I never would have had the opportunities.
Yeah, I know a lot of people that I've chatted with, Rhonda, about all of your experiences. They would never have those opportunities in an entire lifetime to be able to do that. And here you are being able to experience these things just in your short career that you've had with the
Yeah,
NHL. So it's, yeah, like your overseas travel, all the different places went to, you walked and you got to tour, like in the Czech Republic, in Switzerland. So all these unique opportunities. It's I'm happy and it's awesome for you. It's like, but now I want to go and go do what you did and go and visit
yeah.
those places.
I remember we had a day off in Slovenia. I think it was right around New Year's. There was no games there when I was working the junior C's, and for a like a team building thing, they took us to, I believe it was the tallest ski jump, like alpine ski jump, um, in the world. And you see them on TV, and when you see them up close, you'd know from being in Calgary with the Canadian Olympic Park there. But when you actually get the opportunity to go up on top of that thing and you look down and you see how long the ramp is and how big the landing area is, um, and the cool thing was we met it was like a husband and wife that were sort of the property manager, and they knew we were coming, and they came out with this tray of shots. it was called schnapps, and it's not like the schnapps that we would have here in North America. It was like pulling up to the Esso station and sucking on the gas pump. It was
Yep.
just terrible stuff. But the fact that I was able to experience that, again, like what would ever take me to Slovenia? No, again, not disparaging the country, but I can't imagine something else that I would do that would take me to Slovenia, to be able to experience that and be able to make a career out of it at the same time. I've said it before and I will say it again. I was incredibly fortunate for everything this job gave to me.
So, sort of to build on that, can you talk about the relationships that you've made in the various cities that you've worked in? Like, for instance, do you have regular hotels that you visited, and did you get to know the staff there? Did you know the restaurant managers? Did you have a favorite restaurant that was sort of your go-to on your travels?
Yeah, we would always kind of go to the usual haunts as far as restaurants. You try to branch out and try something different, but you sort of get in a routine sometimes, and you find the places you like, and yeah, you form those relationships. Every couple days, four guys come into a restaurant, and they sort of get to know when the officials are coming in, and they you know they you do form those relationships. There is again, I go back to Calgary, but there's a restaurant in Calgary that the guy that it was a husband and wife that owned it, and he's passed away. I'm not sure if she's still alive, but just this little Italian place. No, it's not Tim Hortons. A little Italian place just in behind the Calgary Tower.
Mm.
and we would go in there, and he was the biggest hockey fan. He had hockey memorabilia all over the place, and he just treated us so well. But then there's the other people that you meet along the way too. Hotel managers. I still keep in touch with a couple managers that you just get to know, and they know you're coming in, and they treat you well. They treat you like family when you get there. When you're living out of a suitcase, to have those kind of connections where you, even though you're traveling, but to be able to go to a city and you know this apparently is the Calgary theme on this one, but the hotel manager from Calgary, I would have to have 3 apples for every game. Okay, three
Okay.
apples. that was just what I had. I had one between each period and one to start the game. Um, and she found out one day, Alona, she found out one day that I would have apples before the game. And every time I got to that city, waiting for me on the desk in my hotel room was 3 apples. And it's those connections and those relationships that um, we still talk with Alona. We talk with George from Denver. Just so many people that you meet along the way that um, you no longer look at as just an employee of a hotel, but truly a friend. And yeah, those relationships are absolute necessity. Oh, listen, I'll even tell you about. I know that the station manager for Delta Airlines out of Winnipeg, and the entire staff at Delta in Winnipeg is fantastic. But I had a flight where I think I was going to LA and my bag got lost, and it had nothing to do with a flight out of Winnipeg. But to be able to pick up the phone and say, Jeff, can you help me out? And he tracks my bag down wherever it's I think it's sitting in Detroit. He tracks my bag down and says that bag needs to get to LA. It needs to be there tonight. And sure enough, 9 o'clock, the phone rings from the front desk and they say, "Hey, your bag's here." So those kind of relationships that you form, that again not only makes life traveling easier, but just really good people that you meet along the way.
No,
Yeah.
that's awesome to be able to, even though you're there for a very short time frame, but to be able to develop those relationships and have them last over, I don't know how many years, and
Yeah.
yeah, you just, like you said, you just reach out and say, "Boom, it's Ryan, and I lost my bag." And he says, "Don't worry about it, I got it."
Well, I'll tell you one more thing about Jeff. Um, for my last game, he is he is the keeper of the cup for the Grey Cup for the CFL. Completely unexpected. We come off the ice after my last game in Winnipeg, and he shows up and he's wearing the blue CFL blazer. He's got the white gloves on, and he pulls this card into the dressing room and opens it up, and there's the Grey Cup. Like for him to do something like that for me, I mean, it was just incredible. But again, that's what happens when you form relationships with people. That
Yeah.
yeah, incredibly fortunate. Yeah.
No, that's awesome to hear. Um, Out of all the cities that you had to go and officiate, do you have one where the arena sort of stands out as a oh, how is it worded? Do you have uh, a city or arena that's sort of one of your favorites to officiate in? And if so, what sort of made it stand out from the rest?
Well, that's a really tough question to say one, because there's
Yeah.
there's obviously more than one. But you know, every every arena had its own feel. Every arena had its own atmosphere. Um, obviously getting to Madison Square Gardens in New York and just to be able to experience the history of that. Sorry, Kevin, I can't keep it at just one, but Madison Square Garden in New York, or to be standing out at center ice when the national anthem is being sung at the Chicago United Center. If you're a hockey fan, that's something you have to experience once. Um, Pick any city in Canada, and just how passionate the people are, and what each city brings. Not because I'm from there, but you take a look at a city like Winnipeg, the smallest arena in the league, with what 15-3, and it's one of the loudest. Like, just the atmosphere and the intensity that's brought to that building. The cannon that goes off in Columbus every time I skate around, and I know it's coming, and it still scares the living crap out of me. But yeah, like every city had its own thing. The old Detroit arena, every Joe Louis, like, yeah, just so many memories from every building. So I know you tried to keep it to one, Kev, but that was not going to happen.
No.
Not gonna.
As soon as I wrote the question down, it's like, yeah, I know it can't be one. There's, like you
Yeah.
said, so many memories and history in a lot of those different places. So, yeah, we'll leave it wide open.
Well, again, if I can talk about correlating or connecting relationships to um, arenas, the relationships we formed with our security staff in the different buildings. To go there, and we always had sort of the same guy would, or the same security person would be working our door. So you form a relationship with them over the years. But we also had NHL security that are generally retired police officers, and there's just excuse me, so many parallels between the police officer's life and what they deal with, and to a microcosm what we deal with out on the ice. So we always had these really close relationships with our security staff. But I'll tell you one story of relationships and just simple things. But there's a guy who works the Minnesota Wild players bench, and he was the security guy for them, Marty. And every time I would work a game there and I would come out on the ice, the first door that I passed, Marty was always standing by. And we just had this thing that I would skate by, and he would wave and I'd yell his name. And nobody else in the building knew about it, but it was just a connection that he and I had. In fact, he just sent out a message the other day about it, and uh, you know the Excel Center, because I worked, I think I worked there probably the most out of my career. Um, yeah, you just form different relationships and closer relationships with security and our room attendant, and yeah. So, all right, I'm
Okay.
done. I'll cut it off there.
All right. Last question before we head into overtime here.
Oh,
Um,
you're not supposed to.
what advice would you give to sort of young up and coming referees about traveling and about thinking about making this a career? What kind of advice would you give them um, with the whole travel schedule? Anything that can sort of be summed up in less than 5 minutes?
Well, that sounds like a challenge. Um, so it's interesting you asked that question, because I just had this discussion last week with a young official that wants to make a career out of it, and he was talking with his dad, and his dad said, "Well, do you think you're going to be able to? Do you think you'd be able to handle the travel?" And that was the one thing that he asked me, was like, how tough is the travel? So my one piece of advice: listen, it's an incredibly rewarding job, but you have to be able to spend the time on your own, alone, traveling through airports. That was the toughest part of my job. The 2.5 hours of being out on the ice, that was the easy part of my job. It was the getting from city to city, and the downtime, and trying to occupy the rest of the day, that was the really challenging part. So, realizing that every job has its negatives, and that would be the one that I would say in my job, that when I look back at my negative that came with the job, was the time away, and missing out on family things, and moving to Minnesota, and losing, or not losing, but not being able to be there at the holidays and birthdays for my nieces and nephews. So, all those things you miss, that you don't necessarily think about when you first get hired. But that'd be the one thing that I'd say is understand the travel and the personal sacrifice, and the family sacrifice that goes along with it. and just make sure that if that's what you want to make a career, that's you got to be ready for that aspect.
No, that's some very sound advice. So definitely all the young guys out there watching this, keep that in mind when you're wanting to decide to become a professional official. All right. And yeah, it's we've had some questions come in, so guess what? It's time for All right. So we had a few questions submitted, so we'll ask you. And for everyone watching, Ryan has not seen these questions, so he is not prepared to answer these at all. That's why he's shaking his head. And this one sort of falls into the topic of today. With you traveling so much, did you sort of have a favorite go-to meal in every city? Like, was there something that you, when you saw it was on your schedule, it's like, hey, I'm going to Chicago, I have to go and have this meal in while I'm in Chicago.
Yeah, I go back to what I said. Like every city kind of had its. We had our go-to restaurants. You know, Chicago deep dish pizza is something you have to experience. You get out to the East Coast and you're in Boston and being able to have fresh seafood, or being down in California and trying all the different types of going to Vancouver and trying. A friend of mine took me to a restaurant in Vancouver, and there was stuff on the or food, I shouldn't say stuff, but food on the sushi menu that I didn't even think was consumable. But um, to experience that and try different things. I remember being in Washington, went to Chinatown in Washington, and just pulled into some little Chinese restaurant, and to be able to experience true what I think is more, or what I would assume is more authentic Chinese food than the stuff you get at the mall. But yeah, like you just knew when you went to different cities of what you get. Going to Philadelphia, and the hotel was right around the corner from a little market. Uh, it was an old warehouse that they turned into like a shopping, different stores and food restaurants, and uh, there was one place in there that was famous for their Philadelphia cheesesteak, and to go in there and have it, and they've got all these pictures on the wall. President Obama's on the wall, and when he was in Philadelphia, that was the place that he would go to for his cheesesteak, and yeah, every city had its own restaurant and own food style, and you tried to enjoy or tried to experience it when you went to these different cities.
Was there any one for, because we were both from Winnipeg, was there a regular place in Winnipeg that you want to make sure you stop by?
Hmm. Well, they've closed down since, but there was a restaurant downtown called Mitzi's that if I was there on my own, I would stop in there. They were they were a Chinese restaurant, but they were renowned for their chicken tenders,
Hmm.
um, and their Chinese food was absolutely incredible, but their chicken tenders were even better. So sadly they've closed down. Um, yeah, I'd say that was probably the one that I enjoyed going to when I was in Winnipeg.
All right. Well, now you, whenever you travel across the U.S., you have places that you have to go for food when you're now that you're retired.
Yeah, it's funny, Kev. We would go to a restaurant. I get home off the road, and Ron and I had this agreement that the first night when I was home, I didn't want to go out. I didn't even want to go out the entire time I was home. I didn't want to go to a restaurant because obviously I'd eaten at a restaurant for 7 days. But then conversely, she wouldn't want to have to cook because she'd been cooking for herself for the last 7 days. So we had an agreement that when I would get home off the road, I would cook dinners for when I was home, and that was just sort of a an agreement that we had that satisfied both of our needs. Um, and just, it became a tradition that when I got home, I was cooking, and she would just be able to enjoy a dinner that she didn't have to cook.
That's definitely a good plan. So speaking of retirement, one of the questions that came in, what's the thing that you miss most since you've retired? Like being on the ice, the crew, people, kids, your employer, or mentoring new guys, just for some direction. What kind of things do you miss now that you are newly retired?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of all of that. I miss everything that the every opportunity that the NHL provided, because of the job. I miss that. I definitely miss not only the people that I worked with, but also the people that some of the people that I talked about earlier, about the people along the way, and all the different people that we interacted with. I miss the interactions with kids. I would always carry a puck in my backpack, and I would always make a point of trying to find a little guy at the air or a little kid at the airport, and just out of the blue, ask him if he wanted a puck. And I remember I was in Nashville. I think it was my second last season, third last season. The Rangers were in town, and there's a little guy and his dad standing in front of me at the check-in at the airport, and he's wearing a Rangers jacket. He's wearing a Rangers hat. So I clearly knew they were at the game the night before, and go in my backpack and I pull out a Predators puck, and I hand it to him, and he looks up at me and he gives me this look like, "What is that?" And I said, "Well, do you want the puck?" And I guess because it didn't have the Rangers on it, it was Nashville. Well, he didn't want it.
Yeah.
But his dad goes, "Whoa, hang on a second. This gentleman's giving you a puck." And his dad asked me where it was from, and I said, "Well, I was refereeing the night before, and it was a game puck." And he goes, "Oh, my son and I were on a father son trip, and we're going around to some different arenas, and they were just kind of following the Rangers when they were on a road trip, and that night they were in Nashville." So I gave him the puck, and we talked at the boarding gate for probably half an hour, and then we talked on the plane. And I miss those kind of interactions of,
Yeah.
just a simple small gesture that, for us it's small, but to be able to have that kind of interaction with somebody, and to see how much it means to them, to see the smile it puts on their face. That's one thing I really miss, is the ability to have those kind of interactions. And listen, there's other avenues to do that. I'm trying to do that now with my new role supervising, and um, to have those opportunities to interact with people, and show the other side. If everybody just sees the referees as the bad guys out there, and you know what, we're just people, and just to kind of humanize it and personalize it, and to have those kind of moments with somebody was something I really miss.
Now that's a really cool thing to be able to get the game pucks. And was that just something that you started out on your own doing, or did one of your mentors sort of suggest doing something nice like that?
Yeah, again, I mean, we always learn from the veteran guys, and I had a lot of really good people at the NHL level that were before me, that taught me how to act, and to be able to share the experience, the opportunities with other people, and bring other people into our world. And I think that's probably where it started. Was somebody else did it, and I saw the response and the reaction, the positive impact they had, and just started doing it myself. I would do it out on the ice, when in between periods, or in between stoppages, when we were changing pucks, finding a little guy along the glass, and handing the puck through to him, or walking back from the rink, just to have those moments to share with somebody else.
No, that's awesome. All right, two more questions, and you'll know who this is from. It says, did you ever take your wife on the road with you? If you did it affect your routine?
All right. Well, for the record, Yeah, I know exactly where that came from. Um, so in my last year or two, she probably came out on the road a little more often just because we wanted to experience some things for the last time. But I was terrible to travel with. I'm very goal oriented, focused oriented when I'm walking through an airport. I know where my gate is. I want to get to my gate, grab a coffee, and relax. Um, so to have somebody else traveling with me, I was terrible. I was absolutely terrible. I'd get to the hotel room and I'd set the room up exactly as I would if I was there by myself, and not really taking into account the space that she needed. So yeah, she didn't really she didn't really like traveling with me. I think us coming off the cruise and just coming off a vacation where we were actually just traveling together. I think I think she was expecting the worst, but I think realizing that it was no longer the job that I was going to travel differently. But yeah, she would come along, but probably not as much as she could have. And it's not glamorous travel either. I mean, I'm working in one city today, and I'm off to the next city tomorrow. Um, I'm not sure if that really was something that she wanted to do either. But if I had a series of games in one city, she would come along. Last year in New York for Times Square, she was able to come along for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, she would come along occasionally. Probably not as much as she could have, but probably as much as she really wanted to.
All right, and we have one doozy to wrap things up. As I don't know whether people actually know that you were asked to relocate to a NHL city when you started your career in the NHL. But the question is, after the Jets came back to Winnipeg, did you ever consider moving back to Winnipeg?
Well, that's a great question. Actually, it was offered. I think it was the second year the Jets were back in Winnipeg. I was offered the opportunity to move back to Winnipeg, and we talked about it. But we'd formed connections here. We'd already established ourselves. I think we were 8 years in, 7 years into living here, so we had our connections. Um, but the selfish part for me was the travel was the biggest part of it, of why we stayed here, because the ease of traveling out of Minneapolis airport as opposed to Winnipeg, and Winnipeg's gotten a lot better, but my ability to get from here to virtually every city in the league
Mm.
uh, just made the decision to stay here, really a no brainer to stay where we were.
No, that's awesome. I'd always wondered that for many years. Is like, yeah, now that the Jets are back, I wonder, does he actually miss Winnipeg and want to move back there? But now we know the definite answer. All right, and with that, I'm going to leave the last word up to you, Ryan. Whether it be something travel related or if you had another topic or something that you wanted to talk about, the floor is yours.
All right, I will talk about travel, and this is another part of maybe a message to pass along to not only young officials and people that are traveling for hockey, but just people in general. Um, when you are traveling, just treat people with respect. And I may have talked about this earlier, but just treat people with respect. The person that's driving your cab or your shuttle from the airport to the hotel, you have no idea what their day has been like. You have no idea what their background is. Treat them with respect. Treat them the way you would want to be treated. When you're talking with people in restaurants and hotels, just be decent with people. Just, as I said, treat people the way you want to be treated. And I think when I look back at it, I think that might be why I've been able to foster some of those relationships I have with people. Is I've always felt that I treated people exactly as I'd want to be treated, and you know, it was true. People treated me with the same level of respect that I treated them, and sometimes we get in our own world and we're all rushed around to get from A to B, and we forget the people along the way, and just take the time treat people properly and get to know them, and you never know the kind of relationships that'll come from it.
All right. And with that bit of wisdom, we will wrap this episode up, and we will see you in the next one.
Thanks, Kev.